everyone, welcome in. My name is Heather Meadows Adamson. I am a premium tutor here at Apple Ruth. I've been with Apple Ruth for about 5.5 years now. And one of my favorite things is doing these presentations, these webinars, mostly because I really like demystifying this whole process for you guys. So today's, obviously, as you can see, really, we're going to focus on PSAT scores and what they mean and what to do with them, right? And so a lot of the stuff, hopefully a lot of your technical questions I will answer in the presentation. So I just ask that you hold a lot of your questions till the end. We will have a Q&A segment where I'm happy to chat about anything else you have questions about as well. But yeah, let's go ahead and get started here. So first, talk about Apple Ruth a little bit, our why. We like to focus on the whole student, not just, the content and things like that, and changing really their self-beliefs, which changes their confidence and really makes them have skills they can take on beyond school and beyond this testing situation. Again, building skills for school and beyond through tutoring, test prep, executive function coaching, all kinds of other things that we do offer here. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit about your PSAT score report, how to read it, what to do with that info, how the PSAT fits into college admissions, next steps you can take from here. And then again, we're going to talk about some questions as well. So your score report, right? So the first thing is that your score report is going to be found on the College Board website. That's the first thing. Often you can go to psat.org/myscore. That should take you there. Sometimes it doesn't work, but again, the College Board website. If you do not have this account, sometimes you have to work with your school's guidance counselor to figure that out. Unfortunately, Apple Ruth cannot help you with any of that. So if you're having trouble, really sorry. I will say that College Board's phone customer service is super helpful though. So that's always something you can call maybe tomorrow during business hours. But the next couple of slides are going to talk about the report itself. So just keep that in mind. If you don't have yours in front of you, you can just kind of take some notes and think about it when you do get your report to look at. So the first page is going to show you a broad overview of your score. The score is out of 1520. So there's two sections. You have evidence-based reading and writing. That's what this EBRW stands for. That's a total of 760 of the reading and the writing section together. And then math is out of 760 as well, and that's one math no calculator and one math with calculator section. So again, the maximum score you can get is out of a 1520. Be mindful of your percentile. So you should see this, right? You see kind of below these numbers. That's going to tell you kind of how you are comparing to other students. And so, for example, the way percentiles work, here we see 51st percentile. That means you're doing better than 51% of people, if that makes sense. So it's kind of inverse. So again, something to think about, even if the number is kind of hard to figure out, right? The percentile tells you in general how you're comparing to other students. But I thought the SAT was 1600, right? So yes, you're totally correct. This is the PSAT. It's a little different. It's technically the preliminary SAT. It does not stand for practice SAT. But what you see here, the idea is that, this test is a little shorter. There's a couple fewer questions in each section. It's a little bit shorter in time-wise too. The idea that College Board has is that they've taken off some of the more difficult content, and in their mind, they've taken off 80 points worth of that difficult content. So that's why the maximum you can get is a 1520. There is also a PSAT 8-9 that is for 8th graders and 9th graders. That is even more different. That maximum is a 1440. So if you're an 8th or 9th grader and that's what you took, that's a totally different number. But again, 1520 is the max. So if you felt like you aced it and you got a 1520 and you were like, that's not a 1600, you did ace it, you're good to go. And again, when you take the actual SAT, that max will be a 1600. So just keep that in mind. So these test scores, right? These weird little numbers, they're kind of raw scores that are converted into test scores. So raw scores is like the number you got correct. They're converted into these test scores. These test scores, how they convert them, a little bit of behind the scenes magic. They have different tables they use every year that are kind of like, they have in-house statisticians. That's a little more complicated from there, how exactly they do that. But those test scores are only important in this talk of the National Merit Index. So you may have heard about the National Merit Scholarship. You may see that the PSAT, if we look right here, right, we see it's PSAT/NMSQT. It stands for National Merit Scholarship Qualifying Test. That's where this comes in handy. So And as I say all of this stuff about this scholarship, this is only 11th graders, only juniors, right? So in 11th grade, students who take it, that is entering into the national merit competition. So you don't have to do any other applications. Taking the PSAT automatically enters you into that competition. That brings in scholarship money. It can bring in an edge in college admissions. So even if, sophomores, you took the test, right? That's really just practice for you. It doesn't count when you take it next year. That's going to go towards a scholarship competition. You cannot retake it. It is only that one time you took it. And so what they do is, let me go back actually. These test scores we talked about a second ago, those are going to be used to qualify and to calculate some of your national merit stuff. So that's why those are important if you're thinking about national merit. And so again, really annoyingly, that's a different number, right? So you get a national merit index number. I guess I'll talk about the process first, sorry. So we'll talk about the number in a second. How does the process work in the first place, right? You take the test, right? Automatically entered if you're a junior and you take the test. These numbers are a little old, they're from 2017, but gives you an idea of how selective it truly is. About 16,000 students are selected as semifinalists. Think about how many kids take this in a whole year. That's an extremely small number, right? So just keep this in mind, it's very selective. So some of those complete the additional step to become a finalist. That's just taking an official SAT. From those finalists, about 8,000, I guess a little under 9,000 are recognized as merit scholars, and they actually get the scholarship money and the award itself. But every single step here is helpful and important and valuable. So even if you don't make it past semifinalists, maybe you don't get to this last one or whatever, oh my gosh, being a semifinalist is still really good. There are schools out there that if you are a semifinalist, they'll automatically write you a check for free tuition, right? They don't care that you didn't get the National Merit Scholarship. They're going to give you money instead. Such a valuable thing to have to put on your resume. There's actually even another step even before the semifinalist called a commended student, kind of like a third place trophy, special recognition. Still super valuable, still a nice certificate to have, right? So excellent to put on your resume. So trying on this test is really, it is important to try on this if you're a sophomore, thinking about your future next year and such. Or if you're a junior and you feel like, what was the point if I didn't do well at all? I still try, right? Because getting a commended or even a semifinalist is amazing to put on your college application. Right? So even 0.05% of students actually get the scholarship. Everything else is still really, really valuable as well. How do I know if I did it? Well, again, I talked about that weird index a minute ago. You take those test scores we talked about, and those are used to calculate your index. This will be on your score report. You don't have to do that, right? Your index is going to be on your score report. It's going to be a 3-digit number. That tells you if you qualified. They are done by state, right? So they are, no matter what state, it depends on what state you're in, that's different, right? And I can't tell you what they are for each state, right? I would just recommend just a quick Google National Merit Index, Georgia 2023 or whatever. So just look that up, right? The range is usually going to be between 212, 223. Some years I've seen it as high as 220, right? 220 to 223. Only the students who got those scores move on to the next step. But that's how to automatically tell if you moved on to the next step or not. So again, the selection index number will be in your score report. And then again, just a quick little Google search and figure out, what is your states for this year, right? So those, again, are dependent on your state. The commended number is nationwide, but again, that's kind of just a nice certificate to get. No further steps taken, that you need to take there. So again, that's national merit. It's a little funky. As a reminder, national merit is for juniors only. So if you are a junior and you're looking at your score report now, see what is my index number, go see what your state number is, see if you're close, right? If you are a sophomore, this is something you want to think about next year, right? Next year when you're getting ready to take the test and you feel like, maybe this year you got a really, really good score. Next year, maybe you even want to do a little bit of studying or something and see how high you can get this index up. So moving past that part, right, thinking about what else we can see on the score report. So you get question level feedback, which is really great, right? So it tells you which questions you missed, which one you got correct. And if we look here, right, we even see in this column where it says difficulty, you see these little 1, 2, and 3 blocks. 1 block means an easy question. 3 is a hard question, right? So, there's patterns you can read in here, right? So are you missing a lot of easy questions, but you're getting the hard questions correct, right? Maybe that means you're overthinking some. Maybe you're just dropping a negative in the math section or something, right? There's definitely something going on there where you're just making little mistakes. Maybe it's vice versa, right? You're getting the easy questions right and the hard questions wrong. That's okay, right? You just need to work on more topics or content or something. Maybe in the reading section, you missed a bunch of questions in a row. Maybe that was a hard passage for you. So there are things to think about and interpretations you can get from seeing the pattern of your incorrect answers. It's still valuable to look at that, right? As we talked about, right, more patterns, time management. Are you missing a lot of questions towards the end, right? Maybe you need to figure out how to pace yourself a little better, save more time for the end. Also mental fatigue, right? At the end of the reading section, which is, you guys are taking this test at 8 a.m. and unfortunately the reading passages are not interesting. Maybe you just get tired by the end or perhaps even bored or worn out. That can be helped with practice, right? Getting used to doing it, being more familiar with it, kind of being able to push yourself through it, get a little bit more stamina. Totally doable, right? But you don't know if you need to do that practice unless you look at the score report and kind of make these inferences from it. Right, we talked about some specific things in reading and writing, right? Large error blocks might indicate a lack of interest or confidence in an area. So again, we talked about maybe there's one reading passage, that passage was so, maybe you remember it. You're like, oh my gosh, there was this passage about seashells that was awful, right? Maybe you remember it. Maybe you need to work more on reading scientific passages or something. So again, that's just targeting specific passages. These are reading-centric tests at the end of the day, so you probably encountered at least one set of paired passages, very challenging sciences passages, right? It's worth noting that on the ACT, which we'll talk about in a little bit, the reading is faster, right? So you get less time to do it, but the difficulty is more consistent. So again, we'll talk about that in a little bit, the differences between the tests and what we take from there. Math centric, right? So generally the no calc section requires you to do a little bit of, long form math by hand, and you have to deal with some other factoring and stuff. If you miss some of these, maybe it's just worth remembering how to do that by hand, right? Especially if you are in a more advanced math class, you've forgotten how to do long division by hand, and that is okay, right? Maybe just time to review that, right? The calc one is a little bit different. It's about modeling and functions, really heavy on the word problems, right? If you're missing the easier questions, maybe you're not reading carefully enough. Maybe it gave you this whole situation and it asked for X, but you solved it for Y. You did everything right, you just didn't do that last step. Totally possible something like that happened, right? It's worth taking some time to read the question more carefully or write down all your work really neatly. So we know what is in that math section. This often is a good question that we get. So they have 3 categories that the College Board has these labels. They give these labels out. The first one they call Heart of Algebra. That's your real core algebra stuff. Algebra 1, a little bit of Algebra 2. Just functions, linear equations. Again, really focusing on linear there. That's your y equals mx plus b. Passport to Advanced Math is going to be your Algebra 2, right? So you start to get into quadratics and polynomials, nonlinear things, exponential relationships. Then they also have problem solving and data analysis. This is kind of everything else, right? A little bit of stats, a little bit of probability, a little bit just pure calculation. So kind of just everything else that gets added on in there. They're also going to have a little bit of geometry and trig as well, but a kind of a small amount of it. What's nice is you do get the formulas for that. So nothing too crazy. But what we find is that a lot of students take geometry their freshman or sophomore years. By the time they are a junior, they've just forgotten it, right? It's just been a while. So again, if you are a sophomore now, we're thinking about next year, brushing up on your geometry before you take the test because it is on there. We'll talk about in a little bit, but the ACT is going to have more geometry than the SAT as well. So we could definitely come back and talk about the PSAT in a little bit, but right, that's kind of how you use those to do this next step of figuring out what does this mean for college admissions. How important is the PSAT? So you guys aren't going to like this answer because it's important in what you learn from it, but not important as you can't do anything with it in and of itself. So they have no direct impact on your admissions process, right? You cannot send PSAT scores to colleges, and colleges will not even see PSAT scores. That's never something that happens. And of course, national merit is, something valuable, especially if you get some sort of recognition from that. That's great to put on your resume. But what it does do is it kind of, introduces you to that world of testing, right? That world of that specific kind of test. It's a great practice run for the SAT, right? Tells you about how you perform on that test. Since it's written to pair with it, even though the SAT is a little longer and a little more difficult, your PSAT score gives you a general sense of what you get on the SAT. So they're pretty much directly related. If you got an 1100 on the PSAT, you could expect to get about an 1100 on the SAT. They correlate pretty directly. The only thing is that if you are on the higher end of the PSAT, that falls apart a little bit. So for example, if you got a 1510 on the PSAT, that's an extremely high PSAT score, you're likely going to be in the 1570 range on an SAT. So just keep that in mind. The higher you get, the little bit more off they get as far as the scores, matching each other. But for the most part, general good sense of what you would get on the SAT. So that's nice, right? You have that immediate starting point of like, this is probably about what I would get. What schools do I want to get into? How does this work from here? Gives you a nice starting point to start thinking about this whole process and what else you need to do. So let's mention the ACT. Let's get a little bit more into that because I have mentioned it a couple times. Thankfully, they're more similar than ever. About 70 to 80% of your content overlaps. You have basic reading skills, right? Reading comprehension, English, grammar skills, right? Where does the comma go? Where's my verb agreement? Graph reading and interpretation, right? You have to see a graph, you have to get numbers from it, compare things. Then of course, algebra, so that's usually algebra 1 and algebra 2, some stats, some geometry. Again, for the most part, those general test taking skills all overlap. Differences we get, the SAT, and from here on out, when I say SAT, I'm meaning PSAT as well, have more advanced reading. And that means more difficult reading passages, right? You may get passages from the 1800s or something, and passages that are more complex or longer perhaps, and more math word problems. Again, it's a reading-centric test, and that means in math as well. On the other hand, the ACT has more advanced science. They have a science section, so a little more into that graph reading and data interpretation. And more advanced math. By more advanced math, I mean they have a wider variety of math. You could see stuff about the unit circle and things like that on the ACT that you may not see on the SAT. Right, and so from here, if you're a student or you have a student with you watching this, they may have started to say, yeah, that sounds better, or no, I hate that, or whatever. This kind of will help you maybe figure out which direction you might be leaning. So how do I use this PSAT score? Again, right, I have this score in front of me. What can I do with it? So what's nice is you can use it to help you decide which test ultimately, and again, that's the SAT or the ACT. Those are the ones you're going to use for college admissions, and you just pick one, right? You don't have to take both. You can just pick one and focus on it. So you have your PSAT score. Again, it pretty much correlates to your SAT score, so we don't need to stress about that. We have an SAT score essentially. Your next step is to get a baseline ACT score. I know it's a little annoying, another test to take, but it's important to do this to make sure the test you're prepping for is the one that's going to be better for you. Take a practice ACT, right? You don't have to sign up for an official ACT. You don't need to do that, right? You can if you want to, of course, but practice ACTs, many, many ways you can do that. Of course, you can do it through Appleroot. We have lots of different options and opportunities to do it. We do them online. We have some free testing weekends throughout the year. I believe the next one will be in February. We also have paid opportunities. If you are in some of our select markets, we have in-person opportunities. So again, that's something you can do through us. Also, if that's not in the cards for you, they sell books at the store, right? Like ACT practice tests. You can go home, take it. There's free ones online as well on the ACT website. There's ways for you to find that and take that test and get that baseline score. Then from there, you have an ACT score, you have a PSAT score. Now you can look at these and compare them. To do that, a little silly, quick little Google, right? ACT, SAT comparison table. That's kind of the phrase you're looking for, right? ACT, SAT comparison or conversion table. It's kind of the idea of what you're looking for there. And what that's going to do, there's many websites that have them. You'll find them on a lot of, very reputable places. It's going to say, oh, you're 26 on the ACT is a 1200 on the SAT. I don't think that's correct, but it'll just tell you. So now you have okay, this tells me actually which one I'm doing better on. If that's 70 SAT points further apart, right, then you're definitely better at one test, whichever one it is, right? So pick the one you scored higher on in the first place. If they actually end up being pretty close, they're about 60 SAT points or less apart, then pick whatever one you like better, right? That could be whichever one you hated less, right? It could be which one works better with your schedule, right? Not all of these tests are given at the same once every year. So again, just different options you have from there. And this is why the PSAT is a great starting point, because now you have this first number. We can go from here and get you on this testing journey. Oops. So next steps, right? So the admissions process, right? Testing is only one part of it. There are quantitative components, right? Numbers, talking about high school GPA, SAT, ACT numbers, right? Tells you how they're going to read your application, right? As much as we hate to say it, these tests are not going anywhere, at least for a little while for some schools, because they are a way to read the application, right? A lens to read it through. Then there's also qualitative components, right? That's your essays, your recommendations, the activities you've done, demonstrated interest. Is there a cohesive story there ultimately, right? Are you not just joining a bunch of clubs in your senior year to put on your resume and things? You want something that kind of tells a story about you as a student there. And again, I may have mentioned this earlier, but all schools take the SAT and the ACT. You can just pick whichever one you take, right? Whichever one you prefer. You don't have to take both. So no worries about that. Testing is typically something you do in your junior year, but there's different reasons why it may or may not be. Sophomores, sometimes you need the scores for AP courses. That is some specific schools out there. I don't know, some schools require you to have a minimum score to take APs, whatever. Or if you're doing dual enrollment, right, you do need a test to take dual enrollment. Also, even if you test for dual enrollment, you would take it again later on for admissions. Just keep that in mind. It's not a one and done. Or athletic recruitment, that's also common. They want to see, that you're getting like a minimum score by sophomore year or something. That's super common. Fall of junior year, if you're already in advanced math or English and you want to go ahead and get it done with, great time to do it. Spring of junior year, you're in Algebra 2. So Algebra 2 is a really core class to have finished or have most of Algebra 2 under your belt by the time you really start testing. So if you are in Algebra 2 during your junior year, you want to wait till the spring to start testing, right? Alternatively, maybe you play a fall sport or you're in the fall musical or something and you just want to wait to spring, totally fine. You can continue to take it, into your senior year. You can take it over the summer. If you really need to get just one more point or something, you could take it into September, October. That's totally fine. But you don't want to wait until then to start. That's really something you want to try to avoid as much as possible. And it's good to do it multiple times, right? We're not just hurdling ourselves towards one kind of final end all be all date. We're taking the test multiple times for a couple reasons. Super scoring, I'll talk about that in a minute. That's a good reason that you can really increase your score over time. You gain confidence too, right? The first time you go take that test, you're probably nervous, you're unfamiliar with how it works. But second time you know how it works, right? You've already done it, you're a little more confident. It helps negate any difficulty or scoring fluctuation. Maybe you forgot to study trig, you forgot to study SOHCAHTOA, and there was like 5 questions on the test about it. That happens sometimes, right? But now next time you're going to remember to study it, or there just won't be that many questions on it, right? That happens sometimes. It also allows you to set incremental goals, right? Maybe to get into your dream school, you need about 120 more SAT points. That way you're not trying to get that in one go. You're telling yourself, I can get it a little at a time. Our recommendation here at Alpharuth is to plan for 3 tests and then stop once you reach your goal, right? Maybe you do it the first time or the second time, but 3 is a good number. You can technically take them unlimited times. I would not do that to yourself. We really just found here at Alpharuth that after the 3rd time, you see very little increases, maybe teensy numbers. And that, again, if you're trying to get a specific scholarship that needs a specific minimum, there's value in trying to, inch your score up. But after that, there's really no big increases. And you have lots of opportunities to take either test, right? So if kind of this is, I love this page, right? It's a great one to take a screenshot of. But it shows you some really common ways we can see that people take it, right? So for example, right here, we have October, November, December SATs. Perfect 3 SAT run through, right? Maybe fall of junior year or sophomore year, even it's a great time for you to take tests. You can do October, November, December, done, right? Those small breaks in between tests, that's good, right? Because you're not forgetting too much about the test. It's still fresh in your mind. There's lots of other common ones. We see December, February, April common for the ACT, as well as, like June and July right here together, or September, October. Really common pairings we see here. And so again, thinking about, I do a fall sport. I play football in the fall. This is just not going to, this is just not going to happen for me. So maybe I need to think about one of these other pairings or something. I go to summer camp in the summer. I'm not going to do this. So again, by thinking of this ahead of time, you're able to avoid these, schedule conflicts and making it, less stressful for you at the end of the day by planning ahead. You're not rushing to the last minute to get the test date. When it's happening. You don't schedule something else on the same day. You're not also having to go to practice every day after school and stuff. So the best thing is doing what you guys are doing now, right? Thinking about it ahead of time and getting that schedule going. And so usually this is, again, our recommendation, prep commitment, right? So, you want to do about 1 to 1 hours of instruction to hours of homework, about 6 hours of instruction for every mock test, total about 50 to 70, including homework and mock tests. And this is really the number that matters. So people, you want to start thinking about this 10 to 12 weeks before the test, right? So I'm going to go back to the slide we were just on. Let's say you're planning on taking a June, July ACT pair. Well, you want to start practicing for that here in April, right? Or March. So, that could be taking a practice test, right? And then, if you're in a class, you take a class. If you get a tutor, if you just buy a book on your own, or you just do practice on your own, which is totally fine too. Maybe you're doing an hour of homework every week leading up to this. Maybe you take another practice test and you're doing an hour of homework, right? This allows you to pace yourself, right? You're not cramming the night before the test. This is not a test you can cram for, unfortunately. Getting that regular practice in. So again, you need to start thinking about these about 10 to 12 weeks before you actually take that first test there. And again, planning ahead is just really going to save you a lot of stress in this whole process as far as the testing goes. Again, right, we talked about timelines. This is another great one. Again, lots of different options, good examples of this, right? Spring prep, summer testing. So I was talking about April, June prep, June, July, September test. And you can do some of this. You can do like test prep in July and then you refresh. I wouldn't recommend something like this, but if that's, the only thing you can do with your schedule, that's totally possible, right? Again, all about planning ahead of time to get an idea of what's going to work best for you guys. So how to register, the nuts and bolts, right? So you go to the College Board website to do it for the SAT, the ACT website for the ACT, nothing too crazy there. The College Board, what's nice is if you are, obviously you guys already have an account because you already have the PSAT scores. The ACT, you may have to make an account, but nothing too crazy as far as that goes. If you are someone who has accommodations, that means you get extra time or something for some sort of, any sort of like learning difference or anything. You do have to work through your school. Just keep that in mind. So you're not automatically going to get them. You do have to send in an application. So you would talk to your school's guidance counselor or your disabilities coordinator, or whoever you speak to at school, to get extra time on your regular tests. And they're going to have to submit the correct paperwork for you. And they can talk to you more about this, but if you do the SAT, you just send it into the College Board and it applies to every test you take with them. ACT is a little different. You do have to reapply for it every time you take the ACT. So again, planning something out ahead of time is really important there. And again, your guidance counselor can help you more with this process. And as a reminder, colleges cannot see when you take a test with accommodations. That is against the law. So do not think that's going to hurt your chances or anything at all. You want to get those accommodations if you need them, because you know it's going to let you do your best on the test. So how do I know what a good score is? This is a really common question, right? And an important question too at the end of the day. Best thing you want to do, this is my favorite phrase, you want to look for whatever your school name is. Let's say I'm going to say University of Georgia. That's where I went to school. I'm going to say UGA freshman profile. That's kind of the phrase you want to look. We're just Googling that, quick little search, blah, 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 whatever school freshman profile. What that's going to do, schools love to brag about their classes that they admitted. So that's going to pull up this page. Pretty much every school has. It's going to be a bunch of stats about their most recently admitted or enrolled freshman class. Fun stuff like how many countries they're from and stuff like, how many valedictorians. But also the numbers you're looking for those SAT, ACT numbers, right? And when you get those numbers, then what you're going to look for is the middle 50th percentile. Some schools only show you that number. So if you only see one number, you can safely assume that's what it is. But the reason why we're looking for that SAT or ACT number, because that's where you want to be in. You want to solidly be within that range or above that range, right? That's your competitive set. The bottom 25% of students are either people who are athletes or who gave a bunch of money to the school. They are unrelated, right? Unless you have a bunch of money going to the school, we probably want to be in this middle 50%. The top 25, again, are just the very, very top range. We don't need to be in the top 25 to have a good chance of getting in. Again, middle 50th percentile, that's where you want to be. You want to be solidly in there or up higher, right? So what I recommend to all the families I talk to is, get a family Google Doc or Excel spreadsheet or even just notebook and write down all the schools you're interested in and go find these numbers and write all those numbers down as well and see what that looks like for you. Are there some that are way higher than what you're at right now? What do you need to do to work on there? Getting all these numbers together and actually looking at them gives you an idea of, what this process is going to be like for you. What kind of studying or increase do you need, or are you in a comfortable spot right now? There are really good online tools as well for this kind of stuff. So the College Board and the AppleRuth website both have these really cool tools like this below. You kind of like log in, make an account, and you can add all those schools and it'll show you those things, like similar to what I was saying a minute ago with like a Google Doc or whatever. But again, it's a nice way to see it as well. And that's, a little more interactive. So I recommend making one of those too if you're interested. But again, you're looking for that freshman profile and that middle 50th percentile. That's really important to look at there. And again, going strong, right? We talked about 10 to 12 weeks. It's pretty much just all this is saying. We want to take a practice test about a month before as well to get an idea of what you're going in for on that test. And you must take practice tests, right? We talked about this earlier with the PSAT, right? But they tell you a lot about time management, mental fatigue, wrong answer patterns, things like that. So again, same thing we talked about earlier with the PSAT school report, how you can use that to inform, what your test taking skills are looking like. So I'm going to pause right here for a second. And I believe there's going to be a poll put in. So if you guys don't mind taking a quick little poll for us, just to let us know, how it's going, what we can do to improve and stuff. And then I'll take questions in just a minute as well. If you don't mind just filling those out for me really quick. While you're doing that, I'll mention AppleRuth's happy to help you, talk about your student and what their program needs are. We do everything from academic and AP tutoring to test prep, of course, as well as executive function coaching, lots of different things there. I believe there's also a link going to be put in the chat in just a moment if you want to schedule a time to talk to one of our program advisors. Always an option there for you. And a couple little other things. We do have a new writing workshop that helps your student kind of talk about effective writing strategies. So again, cool new opportunity we have. Definitely you can speak with a program advisor. Again, that link we put in the chat. We also have executive function coaching. So that one's also really interesting. If that's something that you feel like you've heard about or you feel like would apply to you, definitely feel free to do that. Again, the Calendly link will be there. And last one, I promise, we're having a sale right now. And so you can see that sale on our website. You get extra hours for however many hours of tutoring you purchase. So that's all on the website as well. And finally, my favorite part, let's get to the Q&A. So go ahead and submit your questions through the Q&A function. I love answering questions. Feel free to ask about whatever, whatever's going on with you guys. I got one. Okay. Okay. If I take the SAT during the freshman or sophomore year, do I need to take the PSAT during junior year to qualify for national merit? Yes. So the PSAT is very specifically the national merit thing. So you do have to take it during national merit. During junior year to apply for that. But as it was like this year, that's going to automatically, your school should automatically have you do that anyway. And if you are taking the SAT your freshman or sophomore year, it's definitely worth taking it again in your junior year and seeing how your score has changed over time. Yeah, thanks for you guys coming in. Okay. What's a realistic improvement? The score, that's a hard question, right? I know it's an annoying answer as well, because it depends on, kind of where you're starting at and what your situation is, right? Let's say your student is in Algebra 1 right now. They're just simply going to learn more math over the next couple of years, and that's going to be so much more important for them on the test. And even just reading skills, right? As they read more and, start to analyze more complex literature, complex writing, that's also going to help advance their skills. So not helpful there, right? But, there's also an idea too of, where's your child starting at? I find that kids who start in a nice middle range have a good improvement, right? Anywhere from, and again, this is just kind of, if you are someone who starts out, in a mid-range score, like a 1,000 to like a 1,200 or so, and you put in the work, right? You really study and work hard, you can expect a good, a good increase. 100 points is about average, maybe a little bit more. Again, that's just personal experience as a tutor. It's not across the board. If you're starting a little lower, perhaps maybe you're just in Algebra 1, you just need to learn more. Maybe there is room for a larger growth there. If you're starting on the higher end, you simply can't go up that many points, right? At the end of the day. And I will say at the tippy top, those points are harder to get. You work harder for every set of points. To get from a 1570 to a 1590 is so difficult sometimes because the difference is 1 or 2 questions sometimes. So yeah, like it's kind of hard to think about there, but again, it is difficult to think about that improvement depending on where you start at. So, all right, okay. I'm just looking at these really quick. Okay, for Merit Scholar, they take it SAT senior year. Okay, so for the National Merit Scholarship, the way it works, you take the PSAT your junior year, and then if you get selected as a semifinalist, you then do have to take a SAT, I believe spring of your junior year, or maybe senior year. I'm not really sure about that, but they would tell you. So like you don't have to, they will automatically tell you all that. You don't have to worry about figuring that out. Okay. Okay, so I am going to tackle this big question, but I really like this question. Can we talk about test optional schools? Absolutely. Oh my goodness, yes. I didn't add this in this presentation because it's already a really long presentation, but I think it's super important to talk about. So test optional schools. The first thing is that test optional does not mean test blind. So test blind schools, there's very few of, but those are schools that even if you give them scores, they will not look at them. Like they don't think about scores. Test optional means if you send the scores in, they'll look at them, but if you don't, they won't look at them, so on, whatever. The idea is that, other things are optional that have been optional the whole time, right? Taking AP classes, doing leadership things, doing well in your classes. So, a good score only strengthens your application. And so as far as test optional goes, you want to say, does this tell a complete story? Does it strengthen my application? If it does, then send it. Yeah. And by that, I mean, there are, and I don't know the next time we're offering this, but we offer a test optional webinar. It was really in depth about this kind of thought process. I don't know if we have any coming up soon, but hopefully you're signed up and you're on our website and look at that. But I do that one sometimes, and I really enjoy that one. But again, the idea is, does it tell a complete story? Does this test score match what my GPA is, right? Maybe I'm just a bad test taker, but I'm a great student. I have a really high GPA. There's value in not sending that score. All scores are not made the same too, right? So let's say you have a 1200 on the SAT, but that 1200 is a 750 math and a, I'm going to do a little math here, and a 450 English. That's a little worrying. Let's say you have a 1300 there. Let's say it's a reading writing. That's an interesting score. Are you applying to an engineering school? That's a valuable score for that kind of school, right? Even though your reading writing is not as high as your math, that's an excellent math score, right? Is that a story to tell for your student? If you're applying for an engineering program, that's a great score to send in. If you're applying for kind of a general school, a little bit, odd that it's a little bit lopsided, but the idea, right? Does it strengthen it? That's the main thing you want to think about. Another thing I want to say is some schools do still require it. So you want to double check. Again, I'm here in the South, and so I know, for example, I know that UGA, Georgia Tech, I believe University of Florida, I believe FSU, those all do still require that. I think FAMU even does. A lot of large state schools are still requiring them. So double check, look at all the schools you see. If one school you want to apply to needs them, you might as well take them. And if you do well, you might as well send them, right? Also think about scholarships. Again, I know, this is common in the South. I know Georgia, South Carolina, I think Louisiana as well, I think Florida, all have state-run scholarships programs. In Georgia, for example, it's the Hope and the Zell Miller. And the Zell Miller scholarship does have a minimum SAT score you have to send in to get that money. Also valuable, University of Alabama has a scholarship scheme based on ACT scores and SAT scores as well. So you can get, if you get like a 26 or higher on the ACT, you get like $10,000, right? So it's worth researching all of these schools to see and think about, where is there value in me taking this test and working hard to get a good score on it? Can I get money? Is there a school I really want to go to that requires it? Do I think that could strengthen it, right? Maybe my GPA is a little bit lower because I did really bad my freshman or sophomore year, but I really killed it during my junior and senior year. And so I showed that I've grown as a student. Sending in a strong test score also helps show that I have grown as a student and I've been able to perform really well recently. So there's a long answer, right? And so the answer is that test optional means they'll look at it. If you send it, they won't look at it if you don't send it. So the question is, does that help your application? Does it help you tell a stronger story? And then again, make sure you're double checking all those schools and double checking any scholarships available to you as a result of those scores. So again, AppleRoot does offer another webinar that goes way more in depth into it. But that's kind of a really quick summary of some of the points that we hit in that one. So, okay, let me get some more of these questions. How late is too late in senior year to take another test? So it depends on what you're applying for. Most regular admissions, you can take the December test. I believe there's a February ACT. I don't know if that's too late or not. It's going to depend on your school. You'll have to look. So again, I would look at all those school admissions. Some schools do rolling admissions, which means they don't have a deadline necessarily. So you could be good to go as far as that goes. But yeah, it's going to depend on the specific schools that you're looking at. People that want to go into STEM, do you recommend SAT or ACT? Whichever one you're better at. I know that's annoying again, but they're not going to look at that specifically, so you don't need to stress about it. The biggest thing is just whichever one you're doing better on, that's going to make your application stronger. All right. My student doesn't want me to see the results of his PSAT because he thinks he didn't do well. Can I log in separately to see his results? That's a good question. I actually don't know. That's a question I would send to his guidance counselor, or even, like I said, call College Board's customer service. I'm really sorry. I don't really know the answer to that question, unfortunately. Sorry about that. Okay, yeah, can I talk a little bit about our small group SAT prep course? Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So for the small group SAT prep course that we offer here at Apple Ruth is an interactive Zoom call. So yeah, if you're choosing the online option, it's a Zoom call. It's interactive, like it says, it's small group, right? There's a maximum of 8 students in that class, and usually they don't get full. We get about 6 students or so. Is there individual attention? Absolutely, yeah. So all of our tutors are trained specifically in a specific syllabus that we have, and they're trained to help each student get individual attention during the class. And that's a good small size that you are able to help each individual student. There are ways to, if you want to, you can like add on a little bit of extra one-on-one time and stuff, total options you can do there. Our in-person classes are pretty much the same. Obviously, it's just in person then, but we only offer those in some of our markets. So for example, we're in like Atlanta and DC and New York and Seattle. If you're anywhere else, so the online classes are super great. I love teaching those. They're really fun to work with students from all over. But yeah, I definitely think the small group helps give individual attention. I'll take the same question from you. My son's a junior, signed up for the March SAT. We want him to take the March test. Will the SAT course help him determine whether the SAT is best for him? If it's determined that he's better suited for the ACT after all, what do we do? So what I would do actually is, you want to think, it's good that you're thinking about it now. So my first recommendation for someone making a decision is, again, I know it's annoying, but take a practice ACT, right? So if he's a junior, he just took the PSAT, you have those scores. Go take a practice ACT. Again, lots of different ways and places you can take that. Again, Apple Ruth, we offer them on our website, both free, and you can pay for like a paper test. Again, ACT website has a free one you can take. So take that ACT, get that score, compare those 2 scores and figure out which one he's better at first. If he's not better at one over the other, which one does he hate less, right? Which one is more bearable for him? And then from there, right? So the biggest thing is that to go ahead and make that decision now. And I wouldn't go through the whole SAT class, and just in case, right? I would go ahead and make them do it now, and then decide, then go, with whichever class is better for you. All right. When should the first SAT be taken if a score didn't go up between freshman and sophomore year? So freshman and sophomore year, not stressed about it, right? These tests are going to have a lot of algebra 2, like I mentioned, on them. So it's totally fine. Test with a tutor, see which is anxiety, the material. So yeah, I mean, if you'd like, you can definitely go over the test with someone to see if it was the material. But again, as a sophomore, I would consider first, what math class are they in? Do they have all that knowledge there too? And talk with your student and see, whether was it that you didn't know how to do the questions, you didn't know where to start, or you were really unfamiliar with like the math and stuff, or things like that. Again, could be questions to go over with a tutor as well. But I wouldn't stress too much about not seeing a huge difference between freshman and sophomore year. All right. Do all schools post scores of the recent freshman class online? You don't see it on the Georgia Tech one. Oh, interesting. They should. They usually really like doing that. My guess is maybe they don't have it in the same phrasing or something. If you can't find it anywhere, you could definitely email the admissions office and ask them maybe, or you could look at some third-party sites. Definitely possible that you can say Georgia Tech average score and get an idea. Most schools should, though. If they don't, again, maybe it's on a different part of the website, or maybe you can ask the admissions office. Yeah. Okay, switch to the digital SAT. Okay, another big topic. And again, we also do have a more detailed webinar we do often on the digital SAT. So again, this is kind of short, but I am going to talk about that. Okay, so first thing to talk about, this is only the SAT. As of right now, the ACT has not said a word about going digital. So we don't know, right? Unfortunately, we are also in the dark as far as that goes, but we'll have to wait and see what they say. The digital SAT, the first thing is, are you class of 2025 or beyond? Obviously, right? If you are a junior this year, you don't have to worry about it. You won't really have the opportunity to take it. And that's because it's the digital SAT starts spring 2023, right? Right. Yes. I believe spring 2023. My numbers might be off there. But either way, you don't even need to stress about it. No, I think it's 2024. Yeah. So you don't need to stress about it if you're beyond that. What's interesting about the class of 2025 is you have a choice. If you are, again, this is class of 2025 specifically, so you'd be a sophomore now. Yeah, that's right. So you have a choice. If you don't want to do the digital, you can just go ahead and take a paper one and be done with it. But you can also take a digital and a paper one and see which one you like better, which is, again, a very fun, unique situation the class of 2025 is in. Beyond 2025, you're probably going to be doing the digital SAT. Again, this is only SAT. We haven't heard anything from the ACT yet. So it is what it is. The digital SAT is very interesting. It's short. It's a lot shorter. It's also interactive in a way, right? So again, we have a whole much more complex webinar based on this that I do sometimes as well, which is interesting. But again, it's just very different as far as that goes and as far as all that stuff goes. The content itself isn't different, right? You're still doing algebra, you're still reading passages, you're still correcting grammar. So that won't change a lot. The biggest thing is just having to do it online simply, right? Which is interesting. Do we have, yes, so we actually, so I'm gonna, oops, clear this. Okay, so also someone asked, do we have digital SAT practice tests? Yeah, so what I would say there is, we are learning along with this digital SAT change as well. So I do recommend, Alperuth has a newsletter that we share a lot of this different updates with about new stuff we've learned about the digital test as it goes. So I recommend signing up for that. And then, we do offer digital tests. So definitely something to think about taking that. And kind of, again, we have, we know as much as you guys do. Is the paper SAT going to cease being? Yeah, so they're going to only digital. Yeah. So that's kind of the idea behind it. And that's, again, this weird thing with the class of 2025, because of the way it's lined up, you kind of can do both, right? I recommend trying both. Why not, right? But past that, if you are later than 2025, you're pretty much stuck into the digital one. So also, frustrating, but it's worth just waiting, right? Till they start have digital tests and we start to know more about them as well. Still a 1600 score scale and everything, though, nothing like that changing. Okay. Our plan is to do March SAT with an Appleruth annual subscription. That's our self-prep program. So for anyone who's listening, similar to Khan Academy that the College Board works with, we have our own prep program that has interactive videos and tests and stuff. Then from those scores, if needed, take the August one. I have a junior, so they're a junior right now. Yeah, so if they're a junior right now, they take this upcoming March and then the August. Yeah, that totally works fine for timing. Yeah. There is also a June SAT and a May SAT I would recommend thinking about. The only note with the May SAT is that it's during AP exams. So, but I would consider doing like maybe March, June, August, if you don't have any summer plans or something. Is the March 2023 exam paper or digital? I'm really sorry I'm mixing up my dates here. Let me actually check that for you. Okay, March 2023 is paper. Sorry about that, y'all. There's a lot of dates going on in my head. So what it is March 2023 is international digital. That's why it's in my head. So if you're an international student, that's when it goes digital. March 2024 is US digital. Got it. Okay. So that's why I want to double check. Thank you for, yeah. Okay, good. Yes, paper for all of 2023. Yeah. And thank you guys for, I'm happy to have you guys here and answer some of these questions. Yeah, so feel free to send any other questions. Yes, thank you for answering that. I keep getting these numbers mixed up. All right. And again, this is the weird class of 2025 situation. Kind of, if you take it later, you're going to go digital. If you take it earlier, you're going to go paper because it's going to split halfway between your junior year, essentially, which is odd. That's kind of why I say you have a choice. You're in a weird position. Yeah. Are there any other questions I can answer? Again, I like talking about this stuff. So again, the fact that you guys are here is good. You're starting to think about this in the first place. And again, continue to sign up for these webinars. We love having you guys. I really like the test optional webinar, the digital webinar. We go really in depth into that kind of stuff. And again, you have that link in the chat too to talk to if you want to sign up, talk to someone. Digital PSAT in fall of 2023. So I don't really know about the PSAT. I don't know if they'll be offering digital and stuff like that. I think maybe school by school situation. When does my sophomore take the SAT? Spring 2024. Taking a digital PSAT in fall of 2023. Yeah, I guess you can do spring 2024. I'm not really sure there. And again, the numbers are the same though, right? So if you take a mix of digital and paper, that's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that. They're just going to be different as far as the approach in the tests. So nothing wrong with that though. And you definitely can still, have scores from both and send whatever is the best score in. What's better, digital or paper? We're there's something better. They're just different, right? So again, that's kind of still up in the air. We're still learning along with you guys. Okay, my student's taking Algebra 2 as a junior. Took the PSAT this past fall. Should their math score increase after finishing Algebra 2? Very likely, right? Algebra 2 is a huge part of both tests, the SAT and the ACT. Very likely you're going to continue to increase. What I would recommend is thinking about late spring testing, right? So if you're talking ACT, we're talking April, we're talking SATs, May, there's both in June. So kind of late spring, early summer testing. That way you make sure you get as much Algebra 2 in your brain as possible. That's usually a good bet for doing that. We're not from the States. Do you have practice materials for the digital SAT? So Algebra does have some materials on the digital SAT on our website. So you can look a little bit more into that. I believe we have one digital test. I'm not 100% sure on that. But we do have some materials and we're definitely working on, staying up to date on everything that they're doing with that. Definitely something that would be worth calling and talking to a program advisor about, and they can look up all the exact details for you. Yeah, my student seems to be stuck at 700 on the English part. Yeah, that's a good question, right? So we have a lot of students who get kind of a roadblock. First thing would be looking at that test and looking at those patterns, right? Like we talked about at the beginning, what are they missing? Is it that they're, and on the reading, there's a historical passage. Is that their roadblock? Maybe they need to practice those. Do they just need to review how commas work and stuff like that? So with that kind of question, what I would do is it starts with first examining the results and then saying, okay, how do we use these now that we're informed from these to make really targeted practice? So that's super helpful, but that's the first step, looking at it and looking for patterns. And if you take like a practice test and get results, or, you have another one that you have like the test booklet for or something, that's something that, AppRuth or a tutor or someone could help you do. But yeah. Other questions, y'all? Okay. Well, it's been really great having you guys. Lots of really great questions too. So again, thanks so much for coming. My name was Heather Meadows Adamson. And so, like I said, if you guys have any questions, you have down at the bottom of the screen, you've got our phone number, you've got our email. Again, I really recommend signing up for other webinars, especially on those more complex things. So we get a little bit more into those too. But other than that, again, thank you guys again for joining us. I think that's most of it. Make sure, get that link for the Calendly if you want to schedule an appointment. And other than that, I hope you guys have a great holiday season. And hopefully we'll hear from you guys soon. If not, good luck on all your testing as well. All right, bye y'all.